Hi everyone, I'm Pam Laricchia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Ronnie Maier. Hi Ronnie.
Hi Pam.
Hi. Just to give everybody a quick little intro, I've enjoyed Ronnie's participation in online unschooling groups for many years, and I think we actually both started unschooling around the same time. And I've always loved the name of her blog, Zombie Princess. And I am very glad you kept the name even after you sold your boat. I enjoyed reading those stories. She's also spoken at unschooling conferences on the West Coast over the years. And all of that is to say, I'm excited I finally get to actually chat with her in real time.
Yeah. Hi.
So to get us started, Ronnie, can you share with us a bit about you and your family?
Sure. We are Frank and Ronnie and MJ and Chloe. And then we've had our niece Emma with us part-time. Long story, but MJ is 25 and Chloe is 24 and Emma is 19. So, and we've done a lot of traveling and had the unconventional situation where I was the working parent and Frank was the unschooling parent. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I'm curious, share with us how you discovered unschooling and what your family's move looked like.
Okay. We had always planned homeschool for middle school because I find middle school is very dangerous places for kids. But then Chloe, our youngest, was actually very unhappy in elementary school. So I started researching homeschooling a little sooner than we had planned. And all the different methods and came across unschooling and thought these people are crazy and looked away, but kept coming back to it. And I was really drawn by the kindness, on the old unschooling.com boards, the kindness that people showed toward kids, the emphasis on relationship, and the way that, my kids were in a gifted program, air quotes, for the that supposedly was for people like them. And yet still here was Chloe being so very unhappy. And with unschooling, I caught a glimmer that maybe, not only would it be tailored for them, but tailored by them and, at their own pace, because pace was definitely one of the things Chloe struggled with. In school, they want to move on to the next thing. And Chloe's the kind who wants to immerse.
Dive, yeah.
So she was very frustrated by that. So we took them out in December, middle of the school year, and started off by taking a trip to San Diego. So I was kind of thinking, well, we'll let them choose, but then we'll do unit studies. Right?
Yeah.
It wasn't really going to be unfolding. But San Diego kind of showed us how it could be. It was very familiar because we'd done some traveling even while they were in school. And we know what that lifestyle looks like. Let me silence my phone here. Sorry. We'd done some traveling while they were in school. And so we knew what that felt like, that rhythm or lack of rhythm of the day. And it felt right. And we tried one math lesson and then we were unschoolers. Which is not to say it was night and day. I struggled and had to reset myself quite a bit, but that was the beginning. So Chloe was in third grade and MJ was in fourth. Okay, I'm really going to just turn this off now. I'm very sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. So that's really interesting. I especially because it was just a recent conversation I had on the podcast. Last week's episode that as we're recording now. Anyway, we were talking about the transition and, she talked about how she didn't use the word unschooling at first. We were talking to her and her husband and how she used like project-based learning as part of kind of a transitional description because it's such a huge jump, isn't it? From school to full unschooling. Yeah.
Yeah. I got some really good advice on those boards and I wish I could remember which of the moms actually said it, but I went on there just full of what if we do this and it ruins their lives? And somebody said, what if you leave them in school and it ruins their lives? And with what we had seen in Chloe at that point, that was a very real possibility. And so that helped a lot. I mean, the what ifs are kind of a trap. It's better if you can turn them around and make them fit what your heart's telling you want to do anyway.
Yeah.
Because we knew what we wanted to do, but it was scary. So.
Yeah. Oh, I know. And I mean, that was the same with my oldest too, at around that same time, that he was not enjoying it. And I was figuring out, as I tried to work with the teachers, like you were saying, it was just not a good fit, like just the style of how a classroom has to run.
How schools work. Exactly.
Yeah.
And she had amazing teachers. This was an amazing program.
Yeah.
And if my kid couldn't succeed, in that environment, she supposedly has all the learning styles that schools value, and
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it wasn't working.
Mm-hmm.
So
I know.
yeah.
And like you said,
go ahead. Unhappy. Yeah, she got very badly unhappy. So it was in that sense an easy decision. There was no way we were leaving her in there. So.
Well, that's how that quote, what happens if you leave them there, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because I remember that as well, and that hit me as well. It's already so bad.
Mm-hmm.
that I got to try something different. And like you said, so for me, I would notice, when he was home, summer vacations, weekends when we did things, he was like a different person, right? And you said when you guys traveled, you experienced that. So you can see the night and day, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's awesome. So your children are older now. I was hoping you could share a glimpse with us of what they're up to. I love to hear what unschoolers are doing.
Yeah. Emma is 19. She's following in her cousin's footsteps, and she's pursuing an AA at the local community college. Mm-hmm. Quick plug for community colleges here. I mean, Frank and I come from this academic, ivory tower kind of background, and, you have that learned attitude toward community colleges. You can cut all this if you want.
No, it's so true, right?
Yeah. Oh, we just loved their experiences at the community college. The teachers are engaged and experts in their field, and they're thrilled to have kids who come in actually wanting to be there, and yeah, it was wonderful for all three of them. It's been really good. So anyway, Emma's 19 and at the community college, she's thinking about doing something in set design or, something in the film industry. Mm-hmm. Chloe is 24. She moved herself to Minneapolis 2 years ago against her mother's wishes. So she seems very far away, and yet, with the online tools we have now, we're in contact a lot, and it's all right. She's finished her first term at the University of Minnesota there. She's finishing up the history degree that she had started on this side of the world, and working as a barista in the world's cutest coffee shop, and taking advantage of the lower rents out there to live her dream of living alone. So she's got her own apartment, really cute little place. It doesn't have air conditioning, which she feels in the summers, but it's hers. So she and her cat. Yeah. And then MJ is 25 and planning her wedding. So yeah, she's getting married in August. So that's pretty much dominating her life. And she is making bank, that's in quotes, because that's what MJ calls it, as a barista at one of the local stands here. So,
oh, that's very cool. Congratulations. Enjoy the wedding prep.
She's putting together a heck of an event. I think it's going to be really, really special. So I'm excited.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I did want to revisit that point. You were talking about community colleges, right? And educate, because I think that is a significant piece of our deschooling, right? As we start to see learning for the value of learning versus the stratified tiers that are conventionally there about this kind of learning's better than this kind of learning, right? It's big and so important, isn't it?
Yeah, and that attitude that the teachers at the community colleges are there because they couldn't get any better. It's like, no, that's not what we saw at all. These are passionate, engaged, interesting people, brought some amazing people into the girls' lives, both the students, that's where MJ met her fiance, and the professors, instructors there. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's wonderful. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
So now let's dive into our topic for this week.
Okay.
Dismantling shame.
Yeah.
Shame is definitely a very popular tool of control, right? Especially in that.
Just about the key tool of control.
It's the key. Yep. So I just wanted to talk for a minute to start about why we even want to do this hard work of removing it from our lives, right? How does the shame that we experienced as kids get in the way of our unschooling journey, our move to unschooling with our own family, and how can it hurt our relationships with our kids?
Yeah, it's going to vary by person, but the short answer is that when shame hits you, you're going to parent by reacting instead of by responding. You're going to react from the hindbrain instead of responding from your intellect and your heart and your goals for your family. Mm-hmm. We learn shame messages as kids, and this is what's different in every family. But it's things like you're inadequate, you take up too much space, you're unimportant, you're powerless. You're going to know for yourself what messages you took in from the parenting you received. And they're going to sort of be customized for your family going back generations, which we can talk about more. But probably the easiest way to see it in action in your life is to look back at your most painful moments with your parents. The things that your parents did that hurt you when you were young, the things that your parents do, if you're lucky enough to still have them, that drive you nuts now. Yeah. I can give a couple of examples from my own if you want. Yeah. So the thing that is wrapped up in a lot of pain from my youth that my mother was so worried about being embarrassed in public. Public appearances are sacred to her and, still are, but certainly when we were growing up. So the messages we got were that we were kind of risky for her to be around, that, we needed to be controlled, that we make too much noise, that we take up too much space, that you say the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. So that plays out in me now, for instance, with all of the anxiety I had about doing this podcast. Yeah. What if I say the wrong thing, right?
Yeah.
I'll see it still in things like, giving the description of my kids, MJ's a barista, and that the conventional attitude toward that, and that's what she's doing, planning the wedding is, occupying a great deal of time, but she's a barista and that's what she's doing. And the conventional attitude is that she's a failure, and that has nothing to do with the kid that I actually see who's happy and excited and totally engaged with the world and, going out with friends and politically active and right.
Yes.
So, but what I wanted to do when I was introducing her is to say, oh, but she went to the university, she got into the University of Washington and right. Yes. That's my mom's voice in me saying, that you have to appear successful by conventional terms. You have to appear conventional pretty much, right? You don't want to stand out in negative ways or in any way a lot of the time. So with my kids, I had to let them stand out. I had to let them say the stupid thing, air quotes again, and that was very difficult for me because my early training is don't do that. That's scary. That's dangerous. That's right.
Yeah. I'd love to dive into that a little bit because that one hits really close to home for me as well, right? Because, I was responding to a comment on my Facebook page today, and somebody was asking, do you have podcast episodes of unschoolers who grew up and went to college and got high-paying jobs? Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
So, I said, yes, go listen to some of the growing up unschooling interviews I've done with grown unschoolers, and they've chosen to go to college. But I had to say, that they're not choosing college because it's leading to a high paying job. They're choosing college because they want to learn more. They want to go there. And if
Chloe is not aiming at a high-paying job. She's getting a history degree. She's in college because she loves stories and, she loves history. That's why she's there. So,
yes.
Yeah.
And, the same thing with, if I do an introduction and I talk about Joseph and how, he's happily living at home with us and he's 26 and doing his stuff, writing and his interest there. And, some people again could judge that as failure if they're looking at outcomes, right? But again, that is not at all what I see. This highly engaged, interested, so much knowledge that he astounds me still to this day. Right. I learn from him in almost every conversation we have, right?
Who are your best teachers? Your unschooled kids.
Yes. And just because his journey is taking a different timeline than conventional timelines means zero. And I also sometimes feel uncomfortable, if I share, because Lissy's and Michael's stories sound a little bit more conventional. Yet again, they didn't come from a conventional place, right? Yeah. They were pursuing the things they love, and it looks more conventionally successful. But all three of them I love to bits, and all three of them are enjoying their lives and making changes, and things go sideways and they're making different choices. They're all living fully. It just looks different looking from the outside, right? When you have more conventional filters.
If you were raised to put on a good show, it's going to be challenging to face that. People, especially who are new to unschooling, go looking for poster children. Mm-hmm. And I've talked about this in the past some. At any given moment, my kids could have been poster children for unschooling. I mean, there was that moment when both of my girls were at the University of Washington, top flight public university, right? Yeah. And it's like, okay, they're my poster children for unschooling. By the following winter, they had both dropped out. Mm-hmm. Different reasons, And then suddenly, so does that mean they're not poster children anymore? Yeah. No, I think that means they're poster children even more. Yeah. It's because they recognized something that wasn't right for them, and they were able to move toward something that was more right for them. Doesn't mean they're never going back to school. Chloe did. She went back to school, unlike her mother. Right? So that freedom to look at her own life and to decide what's right for her played out where she was able to reconstruct her entire life and go back to school, something that I never managed. I just, got on a path and stuck to it. Right. Well, after a while that path included babies. So that's one of those commitments you don't turn away from.
Well, that was it. I so bought into that path, right? You know, did well at school, got that scholarship to university, did the hardest program I could think of, engineering, and combine it with a business degree, and, get on the dean's list and get married and have children. And then, at some point you wake up. I totally had bought into that messaging, right? That this is how I show everybody that I have value, that I have worth. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Which ties back to shame.
Yeah, exactly.
That you had to prove your worth growing up. Yeah. Yeah. And, it's one of those things, like if I told my mom I felt like I had to prove my worth, she'd be devastated. Yeah. It's not intentional for the most part, although some of the stories I got when I was researching all of this from unschooling parents, things that happened to them as kids, it's horrifying, some of the things that supposedly loving parents will do to their children. But with my mom, it was all pretty unconscious. And that kind of comes around to, you can do better than that by examining, the things the messages that you grew up with, and the beliefs about yourself that you took in as a kid.
And that actually leads very nicely into our next question. And we talk about it so often on the podcast. When we find ourselves facing a challenge like this is, the first step is often to dig into the roots of the issue, right? If you find yourself
Yeah.
reacting with those kinds of control, shame-based messages. So I was hoping you'd share with us some of the roots of shame that you've seen. Like you mentioned, you had talked to people about this. You dove into this topic yourself. So where can some of our feelings of shame like come from as we dig in?
Our parents.
Yeah.
is the key. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're gonna pick up some incidentally at school, at work. You know, the people that you're around can shame you in different ways, but the key is from our parents, and they got it from theirs. You know, unschooling is generational. It goes back centuries. Sorry, unschooling. Let's try that again. If only unschooling went back generations. Shame is generational. It goes back centuries. They got it from, especially, I know I can see it. I knew my great-grandmother and my grandmother and my mom. And so I can follow this, you know, these attitudes. Oh, I'm doing stepping stones with my hands here. I can follow these attitudes, you know, coming down. My great-grandma to her daughter, my grandma to her daughter, my mom to me, and me to my kids. You know, I didn't find unschooling until they were in 3rd and 4th grades. Right?
Yeah.
I didn't find more peaceful parenting until MJ was 5, I think, you know? So absolutely, my kids have early messages in shame. But I think that unschoolers who are raised without shame, more air quotes, from birth are still going to feel shame. What I've noticed is that their sort of shame meter gets set at a different place. So they're going to take in shame from much smaller cues than we had to deal with. Like, and they're so perceptive, all kids, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That little half-second face you make when they say something, you know, they're going to see that.
It means so much.
Yeah, and they're going to take in some shame from it. You know, I think it would do a disservice to pretend that our kids can be raised without shame, because they absolutely can't. But that doesn't mean we're off the hook. We still have to do the work. We still have to look at our own issues, look at the things that trigger us, look at the damage that was done to us as kids, try not to pass that on. And then when you see shame in your kids, you've got to shine a light on that. You know, say, oh, I see what you're feeling there. I recognize this. I feel that too, you know, and it's got to be talked about, which it never was when I was a kid. And then I think that is going to, just by awareness, is going to give them better ability to cope with it, to recognize it as an emotion that they can handle like they do any other emotion, and, you know, maybe implement some tools. Hopefully you'll have learned enough to model, you know, coping with your own shame somehow. Yeah.
I love that point of their shame meter, right? You know, that I remember some comments where they're just so perceptive and they pick it up fast. So even when we are doing much less controlling, you know, then we experience
much less negative reacting.
Exactly. But that little bit, that little hesitation in your voice has impact, right? And
there's a thing in...
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well,
I was just going to say there's a thing in Little Women.
Yeah.
I think we've got some lag going, so it's hard to... there was a bit in Little Women where I think it was Jo sees her mother's lips thin and knows that her mother is extremely angry.
Yeah.
You know? And that's the kind of thing that happens when you're trying to raise your kids without shame, is they're gonna learn what you look like when you're holding back the shame that you experience. You know?
I know. And then there's like, you know, oh, you're mad. I'm like, how did you know? Like yelling when I grew up, you know, to know that a parent was mad. But now I have to like not purse my lips.
Yeah.
But you're right. The key is the conversation, right? Because then it opens up the doors. Like, if for us not to feel shamed by realizing that we created that reaction, even with some subtle thing that we did, and it's like, oh, I want to be an unschooling piece. I want to be a peaceful parent and everything. I don't want to use this as a tool of control. And when you see that they recognize something like that, there's a little bit of shame that we need to work through quickly, right?
Absolutely.
Because if you ignore it, then it just builds.
Exactly.
But if you can acknowledge it and talk about it and maybe explain where that came from, I mean, so many really interesting conversations flowed from that,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. It opens up a lot. They get to know you better, and they gain some awareness. And also, if you've talked about it enough, you'll know, because as they get older, they start responding like, I know, Mom.
I know.
Okay, Mom. They go, okay, I have fully communicated this issue.
Yes. So they go, yeah, Mom, you need a couple minutes there.
Right.
But that's good. That's great, right? Because that tells you that the communication lines are open and they get the point. And, it's everybody just needs their space in that moment to move through, right?
Right.
So we're talking a bit about how it helps to know when shame may be getting in our way, right? That's often, when you find yourself maybe saying something that you're like, oh, I sound just like my parents. I mean, that's almost cliche because it happens so much, right? Oh, my mother just came out of my mouth or whatever. But I was hoping you had maybe some tips that you might be able to share that can help us with that step.
Yeah. John Bradford, who's one of the key researchers on shame, if you dig into it at all, I recommend his writings. He has a list of triggers, things that trigger shame in us. And it's kind of surprising, the list, in that it's got things that you might expect, like, making a mistake or saying the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But it also has some positive things, like success. If you experience a success, that can trigger shame. If someone says something nice to you, have you ever had someone say something nice to you and you burst into tears?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. These can also be shame triggers. He mentioned dangerous relational situations, which I turned into dangerous situations with relations, with your relatives, right?
Yeah.
Family gatherings can be a huge shame trigger, because you're going to step right into, Frank calls them your old tapes.
Yep.
You're going to step right into them. And those can be really tricky. Absolutely, making mistakes can, receiving criticism, or, I cannot receive feedback at work from my manager, who has the assigned task of providing feedback to me. I can't receive feedback without crying. I feel really bad for my manager, right? That's not fair. That's their job to do that. And here I am weeping. It doesn't mean I haven't received the feedback.
Yeah.
But it triggers me big time to get criticized like that, to feel like I let someone down. Having someone apologize to you. A lot of us hate receiving apologies. That can be a shame trigger. And your feelings are hurt, entering into a new relationship. And definitely making mistakes. Oh yeah, big time.
Oh, I know. I mean, I just remember when I thought it took me like 6 months thinking about even starting this podcast.
To put yourself out there. Yeah.
Yes. And the worry about saying the wrong thing, right? That was that push and pull. It's like, I want to be able to just think and speak on my feet. I wanted to gain experience with that. I wanted to get better at that, because that was something, because I always felt before I could have a conversation with somebody, I needed to know what the topic was going to be. I needed to kind of, know what my answers would be, or, what I would say. Everything, all communication I wanted to be in writing because I had more control over it that way, right?
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. But this just felt like something I really wanted to do, because one thing I learned from unschooling is when things are more open, they go so many cool places I could never have imagined. And I couldn't have plotted out a path to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I learned, that's when I was like, okay, I would love to open up the conversation and see where things go, because in my experience, they end up going in delightful places I couldn't have imagined. Yeah. But, oh my gosh.
Make room for vulnerability.
Yeah. Oh, well, there you go. Yes, there's a word for it.
Yeah. It pays off. It just, to be more vulnerable in your home, in your relationships with your family members, in the workplace, it pays off. When I put together the talk that got you interested in this topic, see, that the way I phrased that is going to be one of those things that I rehash endlessly after we hang up. Anyway, now I've totally lost my thread. Sorry.
We're talking about the cool
place. I said the wrong thing, and I went into a total. So, yeah.
It was the places things go when you're open to them.
Oh, well, yeah. When I wrote my shame talk for Life is Good, I opened it by talking about getting laid off, right? And near the end of it, talked about being sexually abused as a kid. Made myself vulnerable big time in a couple of different ways, and ended up reaching a lot of people. It's far and away the talk that seemed to move people the most. And, and I think part of the reason is obviously the subject matter. We all experienced this shame, but to lay myself out there like that allowed people to step a little closer. And, and you can see it play out in lots of different ways in your life. And and now I've done it again. I've revealed both those things in the podcast. So,
but it's so true, and like you mentioned, us being vulnerable within our families, because it's in there that the connections, such strong connections are made, and stronger relationships built. And that's one thing we discover through unschooling. You start replacing school, you start worrying about the learning, right? And you soon enough through deschooling get to the point where you realize the importance of the value of the relationship and the connection. And then that's all you focus on. The learning will happen along the way. But that vulnerability, connection, and relationship is all, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So, I can imagine why you got such a response to your talk. That's beautiful. Okay, so do you have any tools? I think most people start to realize, and start to recognize when shame is coming up for them. Are there some little tips that you could share to help people working through those moments?
So I put together a list. If you have a way to publish it, I can send, or maybe I already sent you the handout. But people need to keep in mind that I wrote that in 2010, I think. So, like I mentioned a therapy approach. Therapy approaches evolve in the list. I'll have to look it up. Hang on, let me pull it up here. The acceptance and commitment therapy is the one that I mentioned in my toolbox. We can just shorten that to therapy. You can absolutely work through things with a therapist. One of the ones that helped me a lot was to kind of describe a situation that you went through as a kid, and the therapist plays the role of the parent you should have had in that moment. Right?
Yeah.
And reacts the way you wish your parent had reacted. And it can kind of shift the memory in your brain as if it didn't happen quite so horribly.
Yeah.
Right? Or, anyway, it can be really healing. And something like that, you're going to want to work through it with a professional, you know. Mm-hmm. There are also things that can help people in varying amounts. I'm not going to say that any of these are cure-alls.
Silver bullet.
Yeah. This is a toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
When you're feeling triggered by shame, pull out the one that feels like it's going to help you the most in that moment. I'm not a huge Byron Katie fan, but her exercise that's called the work. It's this little worksheet where you write a belief that you have, and then you answer 4 questions about that belief, and then you turn the belief around so that, if you have the belief that my mother is ashamed of me, right? You answer the questions about it, and then when you get to the end and you turn it around, you do you can do the opposite. You say, my mother is not ashamed of me. My mother is proud of me. I am ashamed of myself. I mean, there are different ways that you can turn it around. Yeah. That worksheet I love. So I recommend that. Byron Katie, I would take with a grain of salt. She is a little, she treats it like it's a cure-all. Okay. So enough said on that. Some people get a lot of comfort from tapping. It's emotional freedom technique. You can find websites about that. Meditation, huge. Yeah. This is one I would wholeheartedly recommend. Meditation and the ability it gains you to be more mindful in any given moment, where instead of going, right, you go, I'm feeling very upset by that. Right? Yeah. It can help you gain just enough time to respond instead of react. So I highly recommend meditation and yoga, meditation, doing morning pages. Meditation is a catch-all term. You're going to find a meditative approch that works for you. And I use all of them.
Coloring books.
Yeah. John Bradford's book talks about thought distortions. It can be like when you, instead of thinking, I made a mistake, I forgot to put the leftovers in the refrigerator last night, you distort that and it becomes, I'm a terrible failure, right? Mm-hmm. So if you start learning to recognize the way your brain does that.
When it starts spiraling, right?
Yeah. One of the ways I did it, which may or may not have been good in retrospect, but it definitely helped me. When I would have horrible thoughts about myself, I'd say them out loud. And Frank and the girls would look at me and just horrified, like, why would you say that about yourself? And it helped me recognize how bad those thoughts are, how irrational and extreme they are, So I don't want to advocate using your kids as your therapists, but seeing their honest reaction to that,
that thought
negativity was good. Oops. I seem to have triggered something in the Zoom meeting. Am I still coming through okay?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, good. A big one is mistakes. We talked about mistakes and what a big trigger those are. You need to reframe mistakes. John Bradford says mistakes are a label that are applied in retrospect. Mistake is a label that's applied in retrospect. So instead of looking at it as an immense failure, you think of it as a warning for the future. And it's a gift that allows spontaneity, right? Yeah. You screw up, it allows you to go, to turn it into something fun. And it's certainly always a learning opportunity. So that's good. Christine Kane talks about becoming an imperfectionist. So she's got a blog post about, doing things imperfectly on purpose. You set out to do it.
Just to get used to it.
Yes, exactly.
That's a small step, right?
Exactly. Unschooling moms Laura Endress and Colleen Pafe are embarking on a project called Second Best Self. They're on Instagram. You should check it out. They're working on that. And that's another way to my first best self didn't show up today, but there's my second best self, that's.
Yeah. We hold ourselves to such a high standard.
Absolutely.
In that, not even high standard, but impossible.
Impossible standard.
We always want to be the best, be our best selves in the moment, but we always forget about that in the moment piece.
Yeah. In
right?
the moment.
We just keep holding ourselves.
And no matter how good I do, I never think I was my best. I don't, right? So even if I don't have anything.
That's how important in the moment is, right? This
exactly.
That's the fire point.
Yeah. You can develop a little habit, almost a tick for yourself to help I don't know the median age of your audience, but if they're familiar with Carol Burnett, on every episode of her show, she used to tug her ear, and I can't remember now what that was. It was a message to a loved one or something. I don't remember. She would tug her ear, right? So that's an idea. Maybe you put your finger against your nose. Anyway, I think it was John Bradford who calls that the shame siren. You turn on the shame siren somehow. So, you tug your ear to turn the shame siren on, like, oh, there it is. There's shame, right? Just another thing to help you,
That helps. I think doing just anything physical helps pull you out of your head a little bit, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Definitely writing for me has been huge. Morning pages, journaling.
That's me.
Yeah. Words. And then I love this one. It's play. Reclaim. I'm going to get a little weepy.
Yep.
Reclaim the things that you were shamed for. The being silly, the having feelings. Reclaim those, own those. Those are yours, right? You get to have those things. A thing went by on Tumblr about, realizing that you're an adult and you can do the things that your parents didn't let you do, like pay the extra money to go to the butterfly exhibit. And I can't remember the other examples they gave, right? But yeah, you reclaim your childhood, live it now.
Yeah.
The way that you wish you could have lived it then. And that's been a huge part of unschooling for me.
Yeah.
Is because I wanted my kids to play and have fun, I got to play and have fun. I got to be that, my younger self all over again and do the fun things.
I think that was the biggest piece of deschooling for me, right?
Yeah.
Because I was so busy following all that path, right? Which is all about making the perfect grown-up.
Exactly.
It's not about being a kid at all.
And I hate to tell you, kids, but you never get there.
I know. And so learning, I literally had to learn how to play. I had to learn to value play, and for it to be okay for me to play, that's not a waste of time in those air quotes, right? So that was a huge piece, and being able to, it was another thing that brought me so much closer to my kids, right? Because I could just be with them. It wasn't that adult, that adult child separation, right? I wasn't an adult doing it. It was just us playing together, but that took time to get there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's when the answer to the why question, like, why are you doing that? When the answer is because it's fun, that's a good thing. That's something to embrace.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I know. All of a sudden I want to just stop because that's when you're engaged and in the moment, and the joy is just kind of oozing, even if what's fun is hard, you know what I mean? Even if it's challenging.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Back to work. And actually, you wanted me to the John Bradford quote you loved. He said about shame, he said, you either pass it back or you pass it on. The only way out is through. That's what we talk so much about, sitting with the discomfort, sitting with the fear,
finding the roots, exploring it, and moving through it, or else you're just going to keep batting up against it, aren't you?
Yes.
You're just going to keep handing, like you said, handing it back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that gave me goosebumps because it's so true. And you know, you see it, I see it in other people's writing. That's one thing I love, you know, that people are getting to these points about what it means to be human through so many different windows, right? So you can see these same kinds, you know, you see these same kind of messages through Brene Brown and her vulnerability work.
Right.
Right. I see these.
Another more recent researcher on shame. That's really good.
Yeah. I see it through the art and work of Amanda Palmer. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah. She's shrugging off a lot. Yes. And showing us how to do it in the process. Yeah.
Exactly. You know, I see it in so many different places. It's beautiful. And when we find the window that connects with us, right? Whether it's through, you know, maybe John Bradshaw's work, maybe you need to come at it sideways, which I would kind of consider more Amanda Palmer, just seeing somebody else doing the work, you know, or whether it's Brene Brown that speaks to you. It's looking for, like you said before, there's all sorts of things, but it's very individual, right? You pick what might work for you. And it may mean trying a whole bunch of things, trying a whole bunch of windows to help you kind of start poking holes and seeing what it is for you in those moments, right? And then just finding what works for you. That's so cool.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's shift our focus. And, you know, bring it back to some of the happier thoughts. And you know, as you mentioned, your kids are all, and your niece, was it? Was with you, are older now. So I thought I would love to ask you, looking back for yourself, what for you has been the most valuable outcome from choosing unschooling all those years ago? Not
relationships.
12. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to say something more original because I'm sure you've had people say relationships quite a bit, but it's huge. Having grown kids who enjoy your company, who call you when they're feeling sad, who want to go shopping with you or have you come visit them in Minneapolis. I mean, it's huge. And it continues to be work this is a little off topic, but having grown kids is an interesting challenge. You know, it's how much do you say? How much do you not say? It's constantly, walking this balancing beam, trying not to interfere too much, trying not to give advice when they're not looking for that. You kind of feel your way. And that's another one where, you just keep shining a light on what you're trying to do. Keep checking in, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like MJ, the older one, I leave her alone a lot. She's fiercely independent, and of the two of them, has more baggage with me, because she was that kid who experienced before peaceful parenting, and a lot more baggage there. So I leave her alone, but periodically I check in. I send her cute cat photos on Instagram, right?
Yeah,
things like that. And I check in and say, I've been leaving you alone. Is that what you want? And she'll say, yeah, I appreciate it. She knows what I'm doing and recognizes that, that I'm giving her a space that she wants. And then totally different relationship with Chloe, but still needing to walk that line, where she and I talk almost every day, joined at the hip, 1,400 miles apart. Right.
Yeah.
But then there will be days where she goes quiet, it's like, okay, Chloe's having some mom free time. I get that. Right. Anyway, but the foundation that we have that allows us to do that kind of checking in with each other and trusting each other, to listen if we're getting it wrong, or anyway, it's gold.
It is.
Yeah. I could not have imagined how happy a family could be, before unschooling. It's not something you're told. It's not something you lived, the bonds that you have and the fun that you have. And yeah.
Oh, I love that, Ronnie. And it's so true. And you know what? Someday I'll put together an episode with so many of the guests saying relationships.
Relationships.
That's my answer too, right? Because you have no idea before you start, do you?
Yeah.
Of the kind of relationships. And I love the point that it's not like, oh, we started unschooling, we developed this great relationship, and we just keep going.
And there it is.
Yeah, and there it is forever, right? It's like, oh, we're all human beings living together, and
or 1,400 miles apart.
Yes. Yes, exactly. But in relationship, right?
Yes.
And that it almost it makes it easier to accept our growth and change when we see it in our children, and it's perfectly normal. Like, you understand how they're growing and changing. It's like, oh, people grow and change. And, sometimes we step on each other's toes, and that connection that we can, reach out and say, hey, this is kind of mom-free space for the day or for weeks or however long it's, to be able to have that level of connection where you can just ask those questions and people will honestly answer. Like, that's one thread that we've talked about throughout the episode, right? Is with our children is the importance of the value of that openness of communication, that we don't feel shame if they if they're enjoying their independence and they don't need to communicate that often, right? It's just that level of relationship. Who knew that kind of a relationship with any person could exist, right? Especially with parent and children. Yeah, I love that. It's just a shock because there's no expectation or understanding of where you can get to when you start, right?
Yeah. And that it kind of goes back to my first reaction, learning about unschooling. These people are crazy.
Crazy?
Yeah. It's like, no, actually it's the rest of the world that's crazy because but they don't know.
They don't know.
They don't know what they're turning away from, Anyway.
Yes. Well, now that we're both speechless, it's probably a good time to stop. So I want to thank you so much, Ronnie, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you for having me. And it was fun, and I don't think I said anything too wrong.
Nope, you and we now vow that the whole episode can go out. Now, before we go, where's the best place for people to connect with you online?
Well, my blog is much neglected, but that's, God, I can't even remember. It's zombieprincess.blogspot.com.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a hashtag, a label there, unschooling, if you want to ignore all the family news. Yeah. And right now I'm taking a Facebook break, so can't really find me there. Yeah. If they want to email me, they can get that through you probably.
Yep. Yeah, sure. They can get in touch with me or they can probably comment on your blog as well. No problem. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ronnie.
Thanks again. Thanks for having me.
No, I really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks. And have a great day.
Thanks, you too.